executive life coach and master problem solver. Today, we're here with two members of the biggest protest movement in the world since the anti-war and civil rights protest. We speak, of course, of Occupy Wall Street movement. Almost a year old, the movement originated downtown. It states that it seeks economic equality, the end of corporate influence, and a more directly democratic society. I am pleased to be here with two of Occupy Wall Street's organizer, Justin Wedes and Pete Dutro. Now, Justin is 26 years old, a former New York City high school educator. He's now a full-time occupier, as well as a web designer and social media consultant. Pete Dutro has served the Occupy movement as their financial consultant, managing over $500,000 in donations. He's also a tattoo artist and a former finance major at NYU. We're going to talk about how hard it's been, how they've been received, where they came from, where they're going. Guys, welcome to our show. Pete and Justin, I really welcome you. I'm glad that Occupy Wall Street is occupying GluckRadio, and this is really exciting.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, you're really welcome. One of my pet peeves is when people place judgment without understanding what they're judging. And everyone has very strong feelings about the Occupy Wall Street movement. Everyone does, but I don't know who understands what it is and what it's all about. So one of the things that is very important to me is that you both have been involved in the movement from the very beginning. So though the media has been hard on the movement, tell me, what is the movement all about? Does it have a core philosophy? Does it have an agenda? And does it have a way to achieve that agenda? Give my audience the ability to understand before they judge what it is that you're trying to accomplish.
In one sentence, to me, Occupy Wall Street is about economic justice. It is the struggle of a people that have lost their democracy, and they are taking to the streets, they're taking direct action because they want to reclaim the power that they, as a mass, as the 99%, can reclaim, have every constitutional right to reclaim, and are going to continue to take direct action towards that goal.
I would actually like to add, one of the reasons I think the media has had such a hard time like trying to pin down what it is it kind of reminds me of a Sufi story about the Mullah Nasruddin, where the wise men of the king say to the king, "Oh, we gotta try him for being a heretic." So the mullah comes in and he says, "If you guys are so wise, why don't you each write down what bread is for me?" They all write down their answers. One guy's like, flour, yeast, and water. The other guy's, "Oh, something you eat with your meal." They all write down a different answer. And at the end, the mullah says to the king, he's like, "None of these guys can agree even what bread is, yet they all unanimously agree that I'm a heretic." You know what I mean?
No, it's actually a good story, but
that's the thing, is like everybody looks at it kind of differently, and it's such a broad, encompassing kind of umbrella that like, but it started out with like what Justin was saying, like the fact that, you know, there has been a rising inequality and a really one-sidedness in kind of the application of law, the application of like who has access to the halls of power, and kind of a complete misunderstanding of really how this republic's supposed to, you know, function. Because we're not a democracy, but we have a representative, you know, form of democracy, but we are not a direct democracy. We are a republic, so everybody has to take their part to do their civic duty. And this was kind of a call to action for the 99% to kind of get up, start doing your civic duty.
All right, so I'm going to challenge a couple of things, and I want to hear what you guys have to say. We talk about the 99%. If everyone in Manhattan had one vote, and they were asked to vote, do you want to see the Occupy Wall Street movement, okay, be limited to expression on this corner or that corner, so on and so forth. And the vast majority agreed. Would you go with that?
Absolutely. I mean, this is a movement of it's an expression of a desire, of a want. It's not a top-down hierarchical organization that is feeding talking points and bullet points to its members. That's not the way that action is initiated in this movement. It is really grassroots. It rises up from the desire of the people that are participating. And I think that that's what we saw in September and October at the beginning of Occupy Wall Street. It was so inclusive, it was so inviting that people from across the political spectrum, which, by the way, is very narrow in this country as compared to the global political spectrum, right? Which is why so many people are so frustrated right now with the Democrats and Republicans, because it doesn't represent their core values to many people. But across that spectrum and beyond that spectrum, people came out and they sympathized and they were interested and curious about what was happening in Zuccotti Park, because it was not a dictate. It wasn't a top-down marching orders situation.
Justin, if there were 10 naked, pretty women in Zuccotti Park, we'd have everyone look at that too. So I don't.
That helped.
Right. So I don't know really if that's not the case. But I'm focused on this 99%,
Right.
Because if in fact 99% of the people feel that there is a disempowerment, then why isn't there someone? Is there a political structure? We mentioned democracy. It sounds a little bit more like an anarchist movement. I could be wrong, but you tell me.
Well, it's always struggled as a movement. We've always had the confluence of many different previous movements, right? And already existing organizational structures, philosophies, political ideologies. But I would not say that Occupy Wall Street is any single one of those. What it is, though, and again, bringing it back to the 99%, this is an opportunity.
Who are these 99% there? 99% of what?
99% of the people in this country make less than $600,000 a year. 99% of the people in this country aren't getting along just splendidly right now in the economy. That's the 99% I'm talking about. And much of that 99% is not really doing anything, is not really politically activated in any way. The political system, the establishment, doesn't encourage participation. In fact, it's very happy for people to be complacent. It's very happy to purge people off voters' lists. It's very happy for people to stay on their couch and not speak out. And that is exactly what is challenged by Occupy Wall Street. It's challenging people to raise their political engagement to a new level.
Justin, are you, both of you, are you asking for equality for people who are willing to put in the same amount of effort, work, time, and talent? Or are you asking for equality for everyone, no matter how much or how little they contribute?
I want everybody to have a fair chance. I want everybody to have the opportunity to succeed if they want to. That's not much to ask. That is what Thomas Jefferson wanted. That's what Benjamin Franklin wanted. That was the idea behind our country, was fairness of opportunity, and that has been lost today.
Well, again, and I don't see it being lost, but I really do want to hear why you do. Meaning, those who even go to public schools, if they work really hard and they will get a scholarship to a college, they will get a scholarship to graduate school, they will be able to enter into the halls of power.
That's not necessarily true.
Well, I've got kids your age, and it has been true.
I'm a public school teacher by training. I taught in New York City public schools just this year, actually. Even during my involvement in Occupy Wall Street, I was still teaching after school. And I can tell you that just this week, two of my former students who graduated from Paul Robeson High School in Crown Heights and accepted to Morehouse College after being rejected and then reapplying based upon their leadership, in fact, in their involvement in Occupy Wall Street, were accepted to Morehouse College, historically black college, alma mater of Martin Luther King Jr., and now are at the brink of not being able to attend because they can't receive the student aid. They have no resources. They have nobody to co-sign their their student loan documents. That is not equal opportunity. Because they don't have the money, because they don't have the financial resources, they won't be able to obtain even the education that's going to enable them to succeed. And that's wrong.
All right. So what you're saying is that you want to see equal access of opportunity.
Absolutely.
Okay. But you're not saying that you want to take that which hard-working people who came with nothing and who sacrificed their whole life and they built something for themselves, you don't want to take from them and give to others who have not worked as hard.
I actually believe that is a myth that is slowly starting to unravel.
What's that myth?
That this concept that people really build things by themselves. You know, if we're talking about access to public schools, you need an education to get there. You know, everybody chips in. You know, it takes a village. And the fact of the matter is, I mean, Elizabeth Warren pointed this out very early on, like while we were still in the park, you know. Nobody gets rich on their own. The fact of the matter is that on the 1% side, like the Wall Street side, they like to say, oh, we're job creators, we create wealth, we create businesses, we create all these things, yet they are heavily subsidized by our tax dollars. They took huge bailouts. They take money. They get these contracts for defense contracting, for building roads, for all kinds of different things that are provided by our government. You know, they make incredible sums of money. And you know what? I don't get access to bid on these contracts. You know, I've never been in that track where I was in one of those businesses. These guys they handpick from their own pools. So the idea that there's like really this access, and every time I've started businesses, and every time I've started a business, you know what? There was somebody there who said, hey, you know, like the first business I got a really cheap lease. Why? I knew the owner of the building. You know, and that was what afforded me to do that. Somebody gives you a hand up somewhere, and it's this kind of selfish denial and kind of self-deludedness, I think, that a lot of people, like Romney himself, like, I built this on, like, dude, you were the son of a governor, you got your dad's Rolodex, you used your dad's friend's money to...
And then we built it with the bailout that we gave to Bain.
Okay, so let's take someone like, let's see, myself, okay? Came from parents with nothing, you know, left home at a ridiculously early age, paid for my apartment, worked 3 jobs, put myself through college, built a business from literally scratch, worked 7 days a week, 20 hours a day for 30-some plus years. Why would I want to take that which I've accumulated, and I'm not talking about, you know, paying my people, family, and so on and so forth, but why would I want to take that and give a portion of that to someone who doesn't want to work, who doesn't want to? No, I understand about access and equal opportunity. I was involved in the civil rights movement before you guys were born. Okay.
Both of my grandfathers were ministers in that movement.
Okay.
You know, my parents were anti-war hippies. Like
I am an old hippie. Okay, you know what I mean. So that's where I come from. What my big problem is that in the same way that there are people who have taken advantage of laws that maybe need to be looked at and rewritten so that they create a greater sense of justice or sanity, and I don't have those laws in front of me. But I'm concerned about the extremes. I'm concerned about the people who come to Occupy Wall Street and have no understanding of what the philosophy and what are their responsibilities. Is there a code of ethics these guys have to come to? Meaning when they're coming, if I asked anyone there, what would they tell me? What are you trying to accomplish?
The beautiful thing about Occupy Wall Street was that we established very early on that code of ethics.
And what are they?
Through our community agreements, our statement of autonomy, there was a very precise defining of this movement. And from the very beginning, it was defined to be a nonviolent direct action movement, which I think we've been incredibly disciplined and diligent in abiding by. You look at New York City, this has been one of the most spontaneous and I believe effective uprisings of young people and of people of all ages, really, in nonviolent direct action I've ever seen in my life, and I'm sure people older than me have ever seen in their life. And that took an incredible amount of discipline. It took an incredible amount of diligence on the parts of the people involved. And I believe that we continue to live by that. This has always been a nonviolent direct action movement. But getting back to your original point about your upbringing, you're a beautiful product of a time that people could raise themselves up by their bootstraps and succeed. But young people today coming out of college are strapped with so much debt, are strapped with such meager and pessimistic outlooks for their future, and stacked on top of that is a very deep-seated feeling of betrayal by their government. I just finished reading Bailout by Neil Barofsky. I don't know if you've heard the book. It's a New York Times bestseller.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think he puts it perfectly. He really understands that what happened in 2008 with the bailouts, which, by the way, was also the impetus for the Tea Party, the same grassroots anger, all right? What happened there really went to the core of people's sense of justice, and that there is a growing divide in this country, both economically, socioeconomically, but also in the rule of law, that there are really two law books in this country now. There's the laws if you wear a suit and work on Wall Street, and there's the law for the rest of us. And that's wrong. And that is standing in the way of social mobility for people, especially young people, but really people of all age. It's standing in the way of progress. It's standing in the way of people realizing their potential and having a fair shot at making it in this country. That's not a radical notion. That's the American dream. That's what people have always believed to be at the core of this country and our beliefs. And it's being threatened right now by our government and by Wall Street.
I think it's being threatened, and I want to hear what you guys think about this. I think it's being threatened by the fact that the basic principle is you need to have the ability, access to work. You need to be paid. According to my definition of money, is the ability to create a solution to a problem. If you could create a solution to a little problem, you get little money. If you could create a solution to a big problem, you get bigger money. But just let me finish my question. So my concern is all this is falling apart because people are not paying their bills. The government has printed money, and the bailouts of that took place in Wall Street. I am completely against those bailouts. Those companies should have been allowed to fail. Okay, you don't have the money. You screw things up. You pay for what you screw up. Okay. But it sounds to me as if there's a part of Occupy Wall Street that is an entitlement as opposed to based upon responsibility.
It's a myth. That is a media myth.
And I could be wrong, guys. That's why you're here.
Yeah.
You're letting me and my audience know what you believe it is. Yeah. Because do you believe that a government should have a balanced budget?
I agree. I agree that a government should have a balanced budget. What I don't agree with is that social services should be outsourced and privatized to companies so that Bank of America, J.P. Morgan, Citibank are profiting off of food stamps and social service programs. It creates perverse incentives and privatizing prisons as well. It creates perverse incentives for people.
Here's one of the things that really bothers me about like a lot of these assumptions that are being put forth. Especially from the right, and even like kind of like the mainstream misconceptions of what we're talking about. First and foremost, if you look at organizational behavior, as a subject of, how do organizations work? Overwhelmingly, it says that most workers are incentivized more by being told that you're doing a good job than actually giving them money. And it belies the point that pretty much fundamentally everybody wants to work. And every new community that comes into this system is always called lazy and, good for nothing, yet they're the ones who do usually the toughest jobs for the least money and work the most hours. This is definitely true from my experience with the Latino community, being a Latino And knowing a lot of Latinos, like, you know, there's a Latino work ethic that's kind of really super old school, yet, you know, what do we think of as Mexicans? Lazy. What do we think of as black people? Lazy. You know, it's these stereotypes.
I personally don't.
I don't believe
subscribe to that. Okay.
No, I don't either. But I'm just saying these stereotypes get thrown out there. I mean, Romney right now has been doing that dog whistle, that entitlements in people who don't want to work, and you know, it's very clear who he's talking about. You know, and it's very clear when they're like, immigrants come here and steal our jobs. They've done studies on this. They don't steal jobs at all. They're doing jobs that nobody wants to do. That's why they're here. If you actually really, like, you know, don't just cherry pick economics, you will see that, like, those vacuums, like, if you're a free market economy.
If we were going to be fair, okay, then I would say that the halls to opportunity, education, to be able to create a small business or build that into a large business should be open to everyone who's willing to do the work. I'd be more than happy to have a flat tax across the board.
A flat tax is very regressive, and you know we've seen that.
I don't think it's regressive. I think it's an equal opportunity.
Well, listen, I'm a teacher, right? And in my classroom, I have a rule. Kids say that's not fair all the time, right? They say that's not fair. And oftentimes when they say that, what they mean is that I'm not getting what that person's getting.
Exactly.
Or I'm getting treated differently than that person. And I say, listen, fairness isn't about everybody getting the same thing. Fairness is about everybody getting what they need. That's fairness to me.
It's not getting what they need, because if a person does not want to or is motivated to do the work, then they could say, well, I need 3 weeks to study for this test. Why? Because I'm working 1 hour and watching 8 hours of TV. And the other kid says, I need 1 week to study for this test because I'm working 8 hours and watching 1 hour of TV.
Right, but I'm not talking about a need that they self-describe. I'm talking about an intelligent, educated person at the helm, which, by the way, we don't have in this country, I don't believe. An intelligent, educated person who's being counseled by people that have the people's interest at heart. That's not what's going on in this country.
I want to understand your last. So what you're saying is the intelligent, educated person at the helm, which we don't have, is Obama?
Yeah, I'm completely disillusioned with Barack Obama. I voted for him in 2008, and I'm very seriously considering not voting for him in 2012.
Well, vote for me. I'm going to run.
There you go.
I'm going to run the country.
But you know, if I'm going to vote for you, then I want to know that you agree with me on this core principle, which is that it's not about entitlement. It's not about giving people something for nothing.
I agree with that.
That's what happened in 2008 with the bailouts, and I'm completely against it.
And I am agreeing with you.
Right. But what I am about is recognizing that in this country there are people that just solely by virtue of where and to whom they were born are already in oppressed communities. I'm not a hater of the 1%. I hate oppression, which, by the way, that's a quote from the civil rights era, if you remember. I don't hate black people. I don't hate white people. I hate oppression, said Malcolm X, right? It's about oppression. And that oppression, which is economic oppression, right? Which is law enforcement oppression, which is a million types of oppression, is holding back people from achieving their true potential, achieving what they could achieve when they're trying to work, when they're trying to get a job, when they're trying to raise their kids, when they're trying to pay their mortgage, all of these things. They're not paying their bills because they can't. They have no money to pay them.
And here's the other thing, too. Like, going back to organizational behavior. Maslow's, pyramid of hierarchical needs.
I'm familiar with it, yeah.
Like, the further you go down on the ladder, it seems like you're lazy. And, like, I'm somebody who I've lived in very nice communities. I've lived in really bad communities. I've had
poor communities.
No, when I was a kid, some of the communities I was in weren't so great. Just like because it was the 80s and 90s, and there was a crack war happening.
Yeah,
this is like the whole broken windows theory comes out of all this. Actually, came out of Boston, but and I'm not saying that like I had it so rough because like. My parents were pretty middle class, but like the people around me, some of them had a lot more and some of them had a lot less. And it's very telling how, like, from just my own group of friends that I grew up with, like where we all went. and it almost has trickled down. Like, how much money did your family have? Where exactly in the community did you go? Which school you went to? I was afforded a lot of opportunities that like helped me kind of, get on the right path that came through public education. I got kicked out of school and ended up having to go to a private school for everybody who was kicked out of public school, but the court paid for that. They subsidized it. Like my family didn't have to pay the whole thing.
Pete, why were you kicked out of school?
Because I was a delinquent.
Okay, so
come a long way.
Why should anyone have to pay for that? That was your decision. You should pay for that.
I was 14.
And
you're really trying to tell me that a 14-year-old makes good decisions?
I'm really telling you
and
that
what
a 40-year-old makes good decisions. I think it's that a good decision at 14 years old is a function of parenting and or what you read and what you believe.
Well,
okay?
I completely disagree with that because it's like...
So why aren't all 14-year-old kids being kicked out of school?
They're not, but there's a lot of them that have it. I was also very much picked out by the public school system as the scapegoat problem child from a very early age because I was different. Why? Because actually I was the kid in the class who consistently didn't study but got 100% on my exam. I was that kid.
No, you weren't kicked out for getting 100% on the exam.
No. I was the kid, I'm saying I was the kid that, I could have, and I did well, when I do the exams, but the fact was I was bored. I was also like singled out very, very early as being a child that was different, that did not fit in this community, that had different ideas, and I was like, always told because I read a lot as a child and I always knew the answer. And then my teachers were like, no, you're wrong. And I'd be like, no, actually I'm right. Go look it up. And they would get very annoyed with that. So it's like from about third grade, I had serious problems in the school. Yet at home, life was easy. I was a pretty easy kid to deal with. Then in the fifth grade, I got put into a class where it was like every problem child. That's really where I got marked. And I had a really kind of destructive point in there because I had a teacher who thought she was a psychologist, and she had a circle meeting where I wasn't allowed to talk, and everybody had to say what I'd done to them. And I wasn't allowed to defend myself, and I wasn't allowed to say anything about this. I lost all my friends that day, and the whole school kind of looked at me and they were like, you're the bad kid now. So anytime anything happened, I got scapegoated. And that followed me. And the reality is that like the things that these kids were saying were things that generally they'd provoked me. It was like, oh, he hit me. Well, you're not saying that you hit me first.
It sounds like you had a raw deal. So
I did, but this is why I got kicked out of school. Like this was
tie,
the beginning
tie this
of it.
into your movement.
What I'm saying is
what are you suggesting for education in this country?
What am I suggesting for education? I think we should go to the Finnish model. Finland has a great model of education.
Since everybody doesn't know what that is, tell me what the Finnish model is.
I can speak to that. I've done a lot of research, and I'm an education activist, and by background, that's what brought me to Occupy. In Finland, they do quite a few things right. The first thing is that teachers are revered. It's one of the most prized and privileged professions in the country and compensated for that.
And I completely agree.
Absolutely. Yeah. The second thing is they have strong teacher unions. Those unions are effective in making sure that teachers have working conditions that are conducive to creating good learning environments for young people. They have one of the highest rates of teacher union membership in the world. They also have some of the highest standardized test scores, but they don't overemphasize standardized testing like we're beginning to do in this country. With the Common Core curriculum that's being rolled out now across the country, which, by the way, even in its own admission, is just the creation of a new market for more and more consultants, more and more publishers, more and more, companies to cash in on this wonderful crony education department that we have, right? And it's all geared towards testing. That's it. It's just geared towards more and more complicated and complex and frequent testing of students, as if that's going to produce education. So I agree wholeheartedly with the Finnish model of education. But getting back to what Pete was saying...
I want to say something.
Yeah.
First of all, I agree that teachers should have the highest status, period, among anyone, and that they should be paid well and there should be a good working environment.
None of us would be where we are
Exactly.
if there was no... it makes no sense that some of them are the lowest paid. It makes absolutely no sense.
It's absolutely absurd. So, and I completely agree with that. Now, Finland has a population of what?
I don't know, a couple million?
Yeah, a few million.
I think, and I could be wrong, I think it's about 4 million.
I think you're right, too.
Okay.
I think it's somewhere like around 3 or 4 million.
Right. So, and it is pretty homogeneous. I mean, there are other groups, but basically Finland is white, Northern European, and from what I know is that they're pretty organized. Finland's a pretty organized country. They do have some strong corporations that make some amazing products. They're known for a number of different products. Would you have a problem in Finland that there are people who are incredibly wealthy and they are running these corporations, providing jobs, providing an environment where we could have these amazing teachers, and that the access to education and the education itself is
having
wonderful.
spent a lot of time in Scandinavia, actually, I've spent a lot of time in Norway. And the thing is that you do not see homeless people. You know why? Because everybody got a house. They treat it as a public health issue, where it's like most people who are homeless because they're mentally ill. That's just a fact. They have.
I think it's a combination of mental illness, but part of that is also drugs and alcohol abuse. And
That's mental illness still in my book. I mean, why are you doing drugs and alcohol? You have some inner pain that you can't get over, and you're trying to drown it out with drugs and alcohol. I've had my own. To be honest,
because this is what I do for a living. To be honest, I think that you are right a certain percentage, and then for other people, they look for the easy way out. I don't think we could blanket.
You're going to always have an exception to the rule, and I'm not going to deny that.
So let's put that aside.
But what I'm saying is that in Norway and in most of Scandinavia, the thing is that yes, you do have wealthy people, and I'm not opposed to wealthy people. Like you get wealthy, good for you, great, but pay your fair share. And that's one of the things like I've noticed in Scandinavia. People pay their fair share, which isn't necessarily a flat rate. The disparity in income is not as great as it is here. Everybody, even if you're kind of poor in Norway, like to me, you're kind of like middle, like working class, what I would call working class.
It's a lot easier when you have a population of 4 million people. You have a very organized society where it's not the type of democracy that you mentioned before.
I agree and disagree with that.
They have more of a democracy like we do. People vote, right?
Actually, more people vote there than we do, like as a percentage of per capita.
I think
because we're not purging them off lists because they don't have an ID.
But I mean, this is like actually, this is the problem. Like, coming to like kind of a consensus on things has been a problem. It's been a big difficulty that we've had even inside the movement.
Why though, when we talk about fairness, why are we making different rules?
It's like the bread I was talking about.
Yeah, I understand the bread, but here's the point. Let's say the 4 of us in this room grew up in the same family with the same parents and the same opportunity, and we went our separate ways, and each one of us, one made 50,000, one made 70,000, one made 100,000, and one made 300,000. We all have the same opportunity to do that. None of us were connected. We're just a nice Jewish, Irish, Italian, Puerto Rican family. Okay? Okay. So why should we not all pay the same flat tax?
Why? Because we have different abilities to pay. How many yachts does Jamie Dimon need? Honestly,
so why?
How many yachts?
This is the big reason.
What happens? Let
me answer that question for you.
Let me answer. What happens, in fact, is that if I want to take my money and not buy yachts. I want to give it to the poor. But it's my money to give to the poor. Okay? I don't personally believe that one needs 1,000 toys to be happy. But I want to make the decision based upon my ability. And why is it wrong for people of greater ability and greater work ethic to simply have what they're willing to work for? I'm not talking about people who cheat or lie or leverage the poor.
They can have it, but this is the country they're going to end up with. This is a country that built a massive interstate highway system to move goods and services across the country. This is a country that put a man on the moon, and it wasn't free. It wasn't free to do.
And this is the country that everyone wants to come to.
No, but this is why that's regressive. First and foremost, when you have a flat tax, basically the amount of money that you're left over with sits. It doesn't start circulating inside.
Why doesn't it sit? I have a flat tax. I make money. I'm building more businesses and hiring more people. I'm not.
No. Actually, all the data has shown trickle-down economics, Reaganomics, doesn't work. That when you sit on your capital, when you have large amounts of capital, it behooves you to sit on it. It does not, like every business, there's only 3 ways you make money. You make money by increasing revenue, cutting your costs, or shifting your tax liability.
Reaganomics did work.
No, it did not.
It turned around.
The country did not turn around until
when?
It turned around slightly, and then it went down. And we had, let's not forget, we had the savings and loan bailout.
It went down
too.
Under Clinton?
No, it went down under H.W.
Reaganomics set up the Clinton era.
No, not. There's many economists that would disagree with you on that, and there are many people that said that is kind of where all this stuff started. Where there's like, you started seeing the social safety net start to disappear, and what you've seen is people who now it's like we've shifted the burden and say, hey, you know what? You're responsible for all these things like your health care, all these things. You just got to pay for it, and if you can't pay for it, too bad.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe that?
That's just mean.
Do you?
But we still like you. It's nothing personal.
No. Listen. Hey, this is what it's all about.
Yeah.
We live in a country where we can actually speak freely without being prosecuted and persecuted.
Well, I would debate that.
That's what
too.
you're saying is actually
I've been arrested.
effective.
I've been arrested for trying to exercise my free speech.
As have I.
So.
But I wasn't wearing a suit. That's the problem.
Well, you should have worn
Learn
a
for
suit.
next time.
I did after that.
Okay, good. That really does help.
But here's one of the other things, though, to that question. Like, when we have things like sales tax and stuff like that, if you have less money, you end up paying a larger portion of your income than somebody who is extremely wealthy, because there's only so many things you can buy, right? There's only so many toys you can have. You're only going to pay, and when you start looking at it as percentages and not just like, I'm paying at the same rate for the same things, it really starts to shift. And it's like, if more of my money is going away and I can't save, what you're going to end up with are people at the end of their working life not being able to, well, you know what, that's a bigger burden to people.
Here's what I would agree to. I would agree that the access to power should be open. But when a person produces wealth, that he should not be punished for working hard.
I don't think it's a punishment.
Well,
No, I don't either.
When you say you don't think it's a punishment, okay, explain what that means when a greater percentage of what right now
if you're wealthy and you're getting taxed at a higher rate, you're still wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
After you pay all your taxes, it's not like all of a sudden you made $300,000, and you're going to get taxed down to 50. It's unrealistic. What ends up happening is,
well, if you're going to get taxed down to $50,000.
Yeah, but even at our highest, when we've had our highest marginal tax rates on the wealthy, they still had more than everyone else. They were still rich.
But why is Europe absolutely collapsing?
Because Germany One of the things is the German word for debt also means guilt. And they have a very old school kind of Protestant
work ethic,
but also flawed view, and a view that's heavily influenced by their own culture. And this is why they're saying Spain didn't actually do anything wrong. Spain did all the things right.
I've been to Spain countless times.
I've lived there.
Okay,
I lived in the Basque Country for many years.
People would get up late, go to work. They have 4-hour lunches. They go out at 11, 12 at night. Their sense of work is that work is you do when you're not having fun.
I think that's a sweeping generalization, and most of my friends that are there would, and most of my family members, we would all disagree with you quite a lot. But I think there is something that they also do realize, that you cannot just be a slave to your job. That does not produce somebody who is, well-rounded, and they appreciate the well-rounded, cultured individuals, and they appreciate their cultures. One of the things I think
so again, tell me why Europe is falling apart.
Why? Because the Germans are saying, "Oh, we lent you all this money," knowing pretty much that it's all going to collapse. Because all these people who were playing with derivatives. So what you're saying,
the Germans' mistake is that they lent money.
No, they lent money. Just like we had, it was the same thing we had here. They were saying, okay, I have right now with mortgages, because realistically, how is money created?
By solving problems.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
How's money created? By solving
I'm talking
problems?
about the money supply. I'm talking about the real money supply. The way the actual money supply is added onto is through a commercial loan. It goes through a commercial bank. Because of fractional reserve lending, a bank says, okay, you have a worthwhile idea. You're right, you solved a problem. I'll agree with you. Like, yeah, you solved a problem. That seems great. We're going to give you the money for this business. We're going to loan it to you, or this house. Or you work enough, you're making enough money that you can afford to pay this mortgage. But like what happened was we spiraled into this whole like money's cheap and easy. Let's give loans to everybody.
With no regulation.
With no regulation. Let's collateralize them. Let's sell them off.
Leverage them 100
guys,
times.
Here you go again in having me have to completely agree with you. Okay? Meaning you have no argument for me here.
Yeah, but Germany did the same thing.
But Germany was a burnt-out city that built itself up into one of the strongest economies in the world.
What about the Marshall Plan?
Correct. They were helped out, but people are still running from all over the world to be in this country. Now, why isn't, since we have a democracy, why aren't there more people who are in Congress, who are in the Senate, who are taking more of a stance? A lot of what you're saying, I completely agree with, but at one point, each person is working hard and they're, in fact, living on a certain amount of money. But when another person creates or innovates or leverages his talent, who leverages his ability to manage other people and make more money over that leverage, is that what you have a problem with? That there are people who will use other people's work?
No, not at all. All we're really saying is pay your fair share at the end of the day. You didn't do that, because if you are leveraging other people, you are leveraging the other resources of our community, of our society. And if we want to have a really healthy society, like honestly, why are so many people so angry and shooting people? Why do we have this crazy gun culture? Like honestly, most Americans, when you poll them, especially on a lot of these issues, fall on the progressive side, but they've been trained, and the right is very clever in their use of the media and the way they manipulate things. Because
hold on.
Do you really believe that the majority of the media is from the right?
Yes, I do.
Well, God
Completely.
bless you. You know, because
this is a fallacy.
It is completely
the liberal. No, it is so not.
You're so wrong.
I'm actually so right about
all
this.
All right. We're straying from the point.
Anyway, we're straying from the point.
But get back to the banks. Let's bring it back to the banks, because you said it perfectly. There's so much agreement here. I think we all agree where things went wrong in 2008, right? But it's like the Yiddish phrase, God, we have the sickness, now please send the cure. Where we differ is, what are we going to do about it? And what Occupy Wall Street is saying is that there's two sets of laws in this country: the laws that allowed the banks to get bailed out with our money that got thrown into their bonuses, right? And government picked the winners and losers in that war, in that so-called free market that isn't free.
People who bailed out the banks.
But then anyone with food stamps is.
People who bailed out the banks were not the poor but the rich.
Oh yeah.
Okay. The bottom line is that of every dollar I make, I pay 64 cents in taxes. Okay.
Right, and I would be angry to see where my tax dollars were going, just as you are, right? So I feel that burden, that tax burden. You probably would have less trouble with it if it wasn't going to drone wars in Afghanistan and bailing out banks. I would have less trouble
with it if they weren't taking 64 cents out of every dollar.
But if they were taking 64 cents on the dollar and putting it to good use, keeping homeless people off the streets and out of jail.
Your movement is about personal individualization, and that government shouldn't control one's rights to find their own destiny, then let me be the one who decides where I want to help people.
I would disagree. It's not really about that. I think what we're saying is that actually I am my brother's keeper. I'm pretty much an atheist. I'm not like an anti-theist, and I was very much brought up in a family where we talked about religion, we talked about Jesus. Both of my grandfathers were ministers. And the one thing that I took away from that was, if you really want to, a lot of people who are screaming about these entitlements and stuff, they also preach religion. But, Jesus hung out with, pretty much the scum of the earth. He hung out with prostitutes, with moneylenders, with all these people who were sinners. And his whole thing was let's, help each other out. I am my brother's keeper. I do need to take care of my community. I do have to build a community that I want to be in. Because this is one of the things we've gotten into this whole thing here in the United States where everything moves really fast and there's always this sense of urgency. Everybody feels like, there's always some crisis that we have to solve. And what does that do? This is like magic. It's like the tyranny of I don't want you to really think. I just want you to do. Because a lot of the assumptions that we end up making end up having to be made in these kind of magical kind of conditions. Like Paul Ryan's plan is magic. I'm sorry. It's just magic. It won't work. And the thing is, it's an illusion.
And Obamacare would work.
As a cancer survivor who hasn't been able to get health insurance because the cheapest plan I've been offered is $60,000, which is I can't pay for, I am very grateful for Obamacare. And you know what? I don't mind buying health insurance. I have a problem
you don't mind being told you have to buy health insurance?
Not at all.
If you don't make them buy it, you're going to pay for it anyway. You're going to pay for it when they hit the emergency
I don't.
room.
You know what?
I'm not 100% in support of Obamacare, but people need insurance.
Let's back up because I don't want to debate Obamacare. What I want to ask is that we are our brother's keeper. Okay, I believe that as human beings we have a responsibility, towards our fellow human beings. Completely agree with that. Okay. Now, right now we live in a world where women are, for the most part, in a good part of the world, they're slaves.
And that's completely wrong. We should also be our sister's keeper.
They're in a state of slavery. They're told who they can marry. They are treated with violence. It goes on and on and on. Why isn't Occupy Wall Street addressing some of the more profound injustices where people simply are actually still kept in a state of slavery.
Because it's Occupy Wall Street. It essentially boils back down to Wall Street and the system that we have. And the reality is,
if Wall Street collapses, tell me how poor people are better off.
I personally think like if Wall Street collapses, we're going to have a calamity. I mean, that's why we had these bailouts, was the threat of this calamity. You know, finance and debt are kind of like a hammer. You can build a house with it, but you can also beat somebody to death with it. And Wall Street has been beating people to death with that hammer rather than building houses. And the reality is that they have concentrated so much wealth and power in basically, New York, London, Frankfurt, Tokyo. These financial centers have created so much wealth and power that they're just stripping it out of everywhere around the planet. And the fact of the matter is, if everything was distributed a little more evenly, yeah, some boats might come down a little, other boats will come up.
Remember, a lot of those bailouts were actually paid back with interest by the majority of those companies.
Actually, they weren't, and a lot of those, and a lot of the bailout money was unreported.
Actually, they were. But you know what? I don't have the facts and figures.
So they came and stole your furniture from your house, but it's okay because they brought some of it back later.
Yeah, it's okay for my neighbor to rob my house.
Or they brought a nicer couch back later.
Occupy Wall Street, guys. You've occupied private property. You went into
private.
Private property. You've occupied people's homes. You have stopped people the Mexican dishwashers.
We've occupied banks' homes.
I was at a dinner.
We've occupied banks' homes to give them back to people.
Here's a personal experience. The Ghetto Film Festival that was sponsored by Robert De Niro to give poor, inner city kids a chance to get into the film industry, to give them the money, to give them the resources, to give them the opportunity. I was at that dinner that was honoring De Niro, and Occupy Wall Street completely tried to shut the block off. These are poor ghetto kids who were given the opportunity to have an access to power and to be proud of themselves and make money. And Occupy Wall Street never asked about, hey, how about the waiters and waitresses and dishwashers that they're screwing for the day? And how about these kids who are doing everything to become someone? Someone is giving them the opportunity. Why shut them down?
Why was Occupy Wall Street there?
I don't know.
I'm asking you.
I'm not part of it. You are.
But
you're Occupy Wall Street.
No, you know why they were there.
I have no idea why they were there.
I'm sure it was to protest the poor kids and the dishwashers. I mean, let's get serious here.
Why were they there?
I personally don't know about that action. I can't speak for that action, and I will say this: Occupy Wall Street is not like any.
No, it's a leaderless movement, correct?
It's a leaderless movement, but
right,
there definitely has leadership.
So no one could speak for anything that they do.
That's not true.
That's not completely
true.
Well,
then is there a leader?
There's not
no
one leader. No, there are many leaders.
People step up when they need to, and then they step back when it's appropriate.
It's like what we were talking about earlier. It's like, a lot of us, there's definitely a core group of us that have been more active than just necessarily everybody who shows up to a protest.
I'm going to invite you back. We have a lot of common ground, and we have some ground that's not common. But what I would want every one of our million listeners to do is I want you to take what Justin and Peter are saying and try to see their point of view. Okay? Don't just reject it because it's not your point of view. Think about what they're saying. Take it to heart. Do your own research and give us some feedback. Guys, it was really tremendous having you here.
Thanks for having
us. Would you come back for another
definitely
round?
Absolutely.
Well, I have one more question for them.
Oh, you did? Go.
We had a rumor. Betsy. Yeah. we were doing our research last night, and we heard some rumblings about the New York Stock Exchange in September. Do you have anything to say about that?
We're having our 1-year anniversary party on September 17th, but it's really a whole weekend of action.
It's going to be a party.
It is. It's going to be a celebration, but it's also going to be a statement that Occupy Wall Street is still here, that we're still fighting, that the problems haven't gone away, but that we've matured, that we're evolving, and we are just as committed to taking on these issues as we were a year ago, and the urgency is even more clear now. So we're excited.
Excellent.
It's going to be a fun weekend.
All right, guys, a pleasure, and I look forward to our next meeting.
Likewise,
Thank you.
thanks for having us.
Today was a very spirited show. Our guests, Peter Dutro and Justin Wedes, are going to be coming back. You're not going to miss it. But they're not hard to find. I want you to find them on Facebook and Twitter. Learn more about the movement. Learn more before you have an opinion. Go to www.occupywallstreet.org. I am Dr. Gluck. Remember, to every problem, there's a solution. I am your problem solver. Please go to our website, www.GluckRadio.com, or call us at 206-337-6139. Leave a message, a question, a comment. You will make our show. Like us on Facebook. Tell all your friends. Till next time.